Welcome, welcome, welcome to our spooky middle grade on-demand school visit. We are so excited to have you, and today I am joined live by 5 amazing spooky middle grade authors, and we also have 3 more authors who are joining us from the ghostly realms. So we will look forward to meeting them soon. We're going to start by introducing ourselves and our books. And let's begin the introductions with the amazing Sarah Cannon.
The amazing Sarah Cannon was coming from another special visit and has completely neglected to have her books in front of her. So I will wave them around in just a minute. But I am the authors of Oddity and Twist, both of which are seriously spooky with a side of haha. Twist, which is the most recent, is about 3 kids who live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and have to battle for their neighborhood when a bunch of creepy monsters from their own stories come busting out of their notebooks and attack their town.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah Cannon. And let's head over to the utterly terrifying Cynthia Reeg.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm Cynthia Reeg. I'm the author of From the Grave and its sequel, Into the Shadowlands. And these books take place in a parallel monster world where the rules rule, and a group of middle grade misfit monsters are trying to prove they are monster enough just the way they are. So there's plenty of spookiness and laughter and some rather startling surprises. So I hope you'll be able to find a copy.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. We are dying to read these monsterly tales. And let's spend a moment now in the ghostly realm with the amazing Adrianna Cuevas.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adrianna Cuevas. I am the author of The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez. This book is about a boy named Nestor who is in a military family, and so he's used to moving around a ton. And even though he's starting his 10th first day of school and waiting for when his mom is going to tell him they're moving again, he wants to make sure that no one finds out his secret. He can talk to animals. But when a witch starts kidnapping all the animals in town, Nestor discovers that she's a tule vieja, which is a witch who gains power by biting animals. So Nestor has to decide if he's going to risk revealing his secret to save everybody in town. So this book is a perfect book for readers who like their contemporary fantasy stories a little bit scary and a little bit funny as well. So I think you will love it.
Well, I don't know about the other authors, but I'm always talking to my dog, so I guess Nestor and I are pretty similar. We have that in common. So for our next introduction, let's go to the horrifying Angie Smibert.
Well, thank you, Kim. I'm Angie Smibert, and I am the author of the Ghosts of Ordinary Objects series. That is Bone's Gift, Lingering Echoes, and The Truce. And these 3 books are all about a 12-year-old girl named Bone Phillips who has a special gift that she's not really fond of. She can touch an object and see the ghost inside of it. And she uses that gift to solve a number of mysteries, and the latest one includes a ghost dog.
Ooh, we have to love the ghost dog. I love all ghost pets, to be honest.
Yeah.
They're amazing. Well, I would love to hear next from the, I've said terrifying, I've said horrifying, the utterly spooky S.A. Larsen.
Thanks, Kim. Hey, everybody. I am the author of this book, Marked Beauty. It's a young adult book. It's about a girl who can see the life energy of people, and she has to use it to try and help her best friend who's been in a car accident. And in doing so, she lures a dark, sinister energy into her world, and with it, a boy. And they both must figure out what this energy is before it steals their souls. And then I'm also the author of this book, Motley Education. It is a middle grade novel, and the sequel that's coming out next year, it's Dead Alley. Motley's about a young girl who can see ghosts, and she must discover what happened to her school project because it suddenly vanishes. And the book has to do with Norse mythology, so they have to go battle beasts like wolves and serpents and all of that in order to save the spirit world and ultimately to bring her family back together. And like I said, book 2 will be out sometimes next year. I don't know when yet.
Excellent. We will be on the lookout for book 2. Returning to the ghostly realm, let's hear from author Lorien Lawrence.
Hello, I'm Lorien Lawrence. I am the author of the spooky middle grade series called Fright Watch. The first book in the series is called The Stitchers, and it just came out in August, so it's kind of hot off the presses. And it follows Quinn Parker and her friend Mike Warren, and they decide to take it upon themselves to figure out what is up with South Haven, this town that they live in, where all these kind of spooky, eerie things start to happen. So they go on an adventure, and they work together to uncover the truth, specifically the truth about their spooky neighbors across the street who don't seem to age. So it's for fans of spooky things, creepy things. If you like Goosebumps, if you like Stranger Things, that kind of vibe, you might be into this series. So check it out. Bye.
So many amazing books. I can't choose which one I'm going to read next. It's impossible. But now let's go to the extraordinarily eerie Josh Allen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Josh Allen, and I'm the author of this book right here, Out to Get You, 13 Tales of Weirdness and Woe. It's a collection of short stories about 13 ordinary kids and spooky things that happen to them, like encountering the haunted paper towel dispenser in the boys' bathroom, or a book report that goes horribly, horribly wrong. And this is what the book looks like when the lights are on, but this is what the book looks like when the lights are off, because this is a glow-in-the-dark book. My second book will be coming out in August of 2021. It will be titled Only If You Dare, 13 Stories of Darkness and Doom, and it will also glow in the dark, I'm told.
Well, fun fact about me, I glow in the dark too, so who knew? That is accurate. And our final author coming to us from the ghostly realms is Janet Fox. Let's see what Janet has to say.
Hi, everybody. I'm Janet Fox. I'm the author of 8 books for young readers. And my 2 spooky books are this one, Charmed Children of Rookskill Castle, set in the castle in Scotland in 1940. And has a very creepy bad guy. And the companion novel to The Charmed Children is The Artifact Hunters, and it's set in the same castle in Scotland, Rookskill, in 1942, and it features a boy, Isaac, who had to escape from Prague. So I hope you enjoy reading them.
Thanks so much, Janet. I forgot that I made Janet a rock star, so it was kind of surprising when she had rock music behind her, but she is a rock star, and she will be stopping by to answer some of these frequently asked questions. So we are getting to our questions now, and these are the most frequently asked questions that we get from students, at least 6 of those questions. And let's dive right in. The first question, how long does it take to get published? Now that is going to be different for everybody probably, but I would love to hear from S.A. Larsen.
Sure, Kim. I actually have 2 answers to this question, if you can believe it. I kind of fell into publishing literally by accident. I had stayed home to raise my 4 kids, and one of my friends was a photographer, and he got this job to interview child athletes or kid athletes, like in their early teens. And some of these kids were like all over the world. They were also actors and stuff. So he was taking photos of them. And then he had somebody he was working for asked if maybe we could do stories along with it. And he knew I was thinking about writing, and I had done some writing when I was in high school and those kind of things. And I thought, I can try this. So I just interviewed these kids, and then I have articles printed in magazines, like athletic magazines and stuff. So then I ended up, somebody heard about it, and I ended up writing for a local newspaper. So that was probably a good, maybe like a 3-year period. So it was really good training to try and do it professionally. After that, I decided that I think I want to try writing like a fiction story. I would say that probably took about 2 years. I wrote one manuscript in 10 months. And while I was trying to find an agent or publisher with that, I wrote a second manuscript. And over that 2-year period, I ended up having both manuscripts sell. Believe it or not, the second one came up before the first one. So I would say about a couple years.
Very interesting. Yes, it can take many years to get your work published. But like you said, everyone has a different story. And let's return to the ghostly realm and hear from author Janet Fox.
So one of the questions that writers get asked a lot, and I do too, is how long it took for me to become a published author from the time I started starting being interested in writing for children and young adults. And it was about 10 years. And I used that time, I went to conferences and workshops and met fellow authors and met people in the industry, agents and editors, and just learned about the publishing industry. And I also went back to school and got my MFA, my Master of Fine Arts in Writing for Children and Young Adults, which was a huge part of my understanding of how to write. And but it was about 10 years from the time I became interested in writing until I was published.
Oh, sorry. I was just having a little side conversation with my friend here, but we're back. So those are very interesting answers. As you can see, it's different for everyone. But let's move on to our second frequently asked question. This question is, how many revisions do you do? Ooh, that is a tough one. We are going to head first to Angie Smibert.
Well, I would say about 275, or at least that's how it feels like. But honestly, it depends on the book or short story. But generally, like for instance, a book like The Truce, I might have done a revision, 2 or 3 revisions on my own, and then with my editor, we do 2 or 3 more. So on average, you probably do about 5 or 6 or more revisions per book. That's just a guess.
Absolutely. It's a lot more than that first draft. Now let's head over to Cynthia Reeg to get her take.
Okay, revisions. Well, I'm not a numbers person. That's why I write stories. So I don't really keep track of them. But the other thing that I do is every day when I open up my manuscript and start writing, I do some revising right then. And like Angie said, you'll do major revisions before you even send it out. Then you'll do more revisions with an editor. But the thing that happened with me with my first book, I was almost afraid to stop revising and let it out. And it was my editor that said, it's okay, it's time to let this one go. So the good news is, young writers out there, there's no pressure to get it right the first time. You have plenty of time to revise.
Absolutely. Those revisions definitely pay off. So that is a question we are always getting, but as we know, this is the spooky middle grade group. So we write books that are full of spooky elements and also fantasy elements, but they're so strange and magical. How can we make these fantasy or spooky elements feel believable in our stories? And so for this question, we are going first to Josh Allen.
I'm so glad I got this question. This is my favorite question. How do you make something spooky? Because the trick I use over and over again is I do this. I start with something that is perfectly ordinary. like a book report or a street sign. So I have a story about a spooky street sign. You know, the school crossing sign that has the boy and the girl in it? Who's in front, the boy or the girl? Well, nobody knows, even though we've seen it 1,000 times, right? And so I have a story where what I do is I start with this perfectly ordinary thing, a street sign, and I let the boy and the girl switch places. The main character notices one day that he thinks the boy and the girl in the sign have switched places, but he can't get anyone to believe him. And then little by little, I let that street sign do something a little weirder and a little weirder and a little weirder until everything's going completely crazy. So my trick, start with something perfectly ordinary and let it do one tiny weird thing and then baby step into bigger and bigger weirdness. So that's how I tackle that.
Ooh, now don't we all wish that we saw the world through Josh Allen's eyes, where everything is a little mysterious, potentially? I love it. But what would Angie Smibert say to the same question?
Well, you're going to make me follow Josh on that one, huh? Okay. I love Josh's take on this. Mine is a little bit more crafty, I guess. It's like, how do you make it believable? You use a lot of details and don't forget different senses, like you want to make it come alive to your reader. So remember, like how does the night sound? There's around here you hear like the cicadas and the crickets and and it might smell like night blooming jasmine or honeysuckle. So use a few of those details to make the ordinary scene, come alive. And then you can add that extraordinary thing and it seems believable.
Absolutely. Yes. Always adding those concrete details. I love it. So our next question is something that is very appropriate for the spooky middle grade authors. How do you write compelling villains? And so to start us off with this one, we're heading into the ghostly realms and we're going to hear from author Adrianna Cuevas.
Writing villains is one of my favorite things to do. When you're writing your main character, you're always asking yourself, well, what does my main character want? Your villain is a great way to keep your main character from getting what they want. But you need to make sure that your villain just doesn't exist only to work against your main character. They have to have their own wants and needs too. So if you can make sure that maybe what your main character wants and what your villain wants go against each other, so that as each character works towards what they want, they end up battling against each other, that makes for a really compelling villain and one that is a little more three-dimensional than just some devious entity that's just always there to pop up and go against your main character at the best moment. So make sure to think about what your villain wants, why they want it, and how that can go against what your main character wants as well. And you'll end up with a pretty great villain.
We do love those villains and monsters as well. So let's turn this question over to Sarah Cannon for her take.
Yes, and just to be clear, my characters are the monsters. I'm not the monster. But this is why I always want to hug the stuffing out of Adrianna, because I agree with her just 100%. I like to make sure that there's a big train wreck that's composed of the inevitable conflict between what your main character wants and what your villain wants. So in Oddity, Ada, in theory, she's going to bat against all these evil puppets whose ghostly hands are on the back of the book. They run her town. And, on the surface, this conflict is, I want my sister back, you have my sister. But on a deeper level, I'm a hometown kid and I thought I knew everything about my town and I don't like there being any secrets about my town that I don't know. And the puppet's saying, okay, yeah, but our survival is dependent on you not finding out what makes us powerful. So both of them have a conflict. And in theory, really theirs is the one that's more survival driven. But you can't really sympathize with them because they're doing a lot of evil stuff. But it makes them it makes them a little more comprehensible, a little more relatable. And then my favorite thing about Twist is that this monster right here is a character in one of Eli's stories. And that sets up a really tricky conflict because he absolutely loves writing the scariest thing he can think of to write. Only now all of his friends are in danger because of this thing that he wrote. So what's he going to do? Is he going to destroy it? This is every author's quandary, because when we're doing those revisions, sometimes we do have to destroy stuff that we really, really like in order to make a good story. So this is kind of therapeutic to set up this conflict with this monster. So you never know what's going to come out in these books. Sometimes it's the stuff that scares us the most.
We have one more author who wants to tell us all about her devious villains and how she creates them. Janet Fox. Are we terrified yet? Yes, we are terrified.
So another question that I get asked a lot is how I create compelling villains, because I've got some pretty nasty villains in some of my stories. So we have to remember that villains don't think that they are villains. They don't think they're the bad guy. They think they're the hero of their own story. So the first thing to make a compelling villain is to look at the world from their point of view. Think of how they're feeling, and then to create the fact that they think that they're right, and even when we think that they're terrible, they think they're doing the right thing. So, and then the third thing that I do is I make sure that they have a very distinct set of both strengths and weaknesses, as we all do. But their weakness, their flaw, may be something that is truly terrible to the rest of us, and that really colors their world and makes them feel more evil.
Well, let's move on to question number 5. The question is, how do you make your setting come to life? And this can be particularly appropriate for these spooky stories. And so let's turn first to author S.A. Larsen.
Oh, I love this question. This is like my favorite part of writing. I love to create the worlds in these stories. What I do to start my setting is I need to get to know my setting, because a lot of times in books you may have a main setting, but you'll have other places where your characters will have to travel or where the story will take them. So you'll have like little sub-settings too. So the first thing I do is ask myself, where am I? And then I actually give that setting like an interview. I actually do character interviews to get to know my characters. I do the same thing with my setting. So like let's say, for instance, that my character's in a house. I ask myself, what room is it? How many rooms are there in the house? Is there a bathroom? How many people are in the house? Just different things. Are there curtains? Are there blinds? All those little things you don't think matter. And you can use all of those things eventually to actually tell the reader something about your character. Like, a kid may be scared of, blinds because when you pull them and they go up really fast or what have you. You can use those things in your setting. Like a cemetery, for instance. Surprise. Is it old? Is it new? Is it grassy? Is it dreary? Is it dark and creepy? Another thing you think about is like the time period that you're in. Are your characters going to be in horse and buggies, or are they going to be in spaceships? Those different kinds of things. And of course, being spooky authors, there's tons of things that you can do. Some of the authors have already mentioned things that you can do to add those spooky elements, different sounds, different smells. That's another thing that you definitely use in setting, is all 5 senses. I do that wherever I am. Like I said, I stand in the setting myself and I close my eyes and I try and think of what I can hear, what I see, and then I try and describe it. And a lot of times I'll do different paragraphs to describe it. And I usually end up picking out different details from each paragraph to make sometimes one sentence, but sometimes that's all that you need to describe that certain piece of setting. Another thing sometimes that I'll do is I'll try to give something regular, a little bit of uniqueness. It kind of builds upon what Josh mentioned earlier. Like, for instance, an oak tree. I won't just say that my character passes an oak tree. It's the oak tree with the knot in it that looks like it's always staring at my character. And then I could build upon that as the story goes. And that's just a little extra thing that I can use to add some tension.
So many ways to build these spooky settings. And I know that author Lorien Lawrence has her own method. So let's hear from her.
Hi, I'm Lorien Lawrence, author of the Fright Watch series and the Stitchers, and I'm here today to talk to you about how I make setting come to life. And there's a couple of simple tips and tricks that I use that you can use yourself in your own stories. So first off, I pay attention to what's around me for real. And I think about sensory details. So when I'm out in an environment, what am I hearing? What am I seeing? What can I feel? What can I touch? What can I smell? What can I taste? And I combine all of those together to try to create a really believable atmosphere. And part of setting is also mood. And mood is like how a book makes us feel. And so when I'm writing, I always play music. I have to have a playlist that coincides with my book. So for the Stitchers, I have a bunch of playlists. Actually, I have different playlists for different characters, for different chapters, for different scenes. And they kind of evolved over the years for the amount of time it took me to write this book. And whenever I'm writing a scene, I play the music in the background, and that helps me get into the mood and helps me feel like I'm there. Because if I can feel like I'm there, hopefully the reader can as well. So those are my top 3 tips. So first, pay attention to what's around you. 2, soak up all the sensory details you can and infuse as many as you can into the story. And 3, make a playlist. I love having a playlist. It really lets me get into the mindset of the book even when I'm not physically writing.
Oh, I have to go make a playlist now. That will be fun, though. I think it's a great idea to make a playlist to set the mood. So I was going to ask Cynthia Reeg about her setting tips, but we kind of covered a lot of it, right? Cynthia, do you have anything else that is different that you do related to setting?
The only thing that I would add is that I go through my character's point of view, because like in the monster world, I'm seeing their world through their eyes. So it's very different. I don't enjoy outhouse smells, but the monsters do. The skeleton trees, the literary skeleton trees clanking in the wind are the usual thing for them to see. So think from your character's point of view, and then the world will come alive. Present it in that way.
Yes, that is a great point. And that's a fun exercise to do, is to put yourself in different people's heads and then describe a scene and see how different it is, because everyone has a different perspective and different things that they're looking for. So I love that piece of advice. And our very final question that we get a lot is, what tips or advice would you have for young writers? This is a great question. So I'm going to ask for a piece of advice from author Josh Allen.
If you want to be a writer, there are 2 things I think you should do. And you should do these 2 things every single day. The first thing that you should do is you should read a little bit of something every single day. A book that you love, a book that you have from the library, a book you've never read before, a classic book. Read a little bit every single day. And the second thing you should do is you should write a little bit every single day, even if it's only 2 sentences. If you just write 2 sentences every day and you do that for an entire year, you'll have written so much and you will have learned so much about how to write sentences. So read a little bit every single day and write a little bit every single day. That's my advice for young writers.
And that is great advice as well for published authors. We need to remember that we have to read and write every day, even if it's only a little bit. So let's go now to Sarah Cannon and see what your advice would be for young writers.
Well, I love Josh's advice. I would also say that it's important to be really curious about a lot of different things. So if you learn something in class and you're like, that's kind of weird, or you hear some weird detail on TV and you're like, I wouldn't mind learning more about that. Do it, dig in and go look it up. You know, we have a tendency, I think especially I remember this from being a kid, to have, things that we like that are normal and accepted and things that are not. And sometimes we talk ourselves out of some of our interests. But when you're writing a book, you want to write something that's new and interesting, that isn't something people read before. And the best way to do that is to chase all your curiosities, because they come together in your head in weird ways. And also be curious about yourself. So, for example, I'm really unduly terrified of zombies. Like, I know they're not real. I've never seen a zombie. The odds that I'm ever going to see a zombie are like, that big. But I'm just absolutely freaked out by zombies in a way that I'm not really scared of anything else. So it's interesting to kind of dig down into why, because that's going to help me again with that realism of like, why is this so scary, and making it scary for others. Some of the best horror writers do what Josh was saying that he does, and make something really ordinary very creepy. And it's usually because, some aspect of it creeped them out or got their attention when they were a kid. I have a monster that has a garbage disposal for a mouth, and that's because garbage disposals freaked me out. And if I hadn't really reflected on that, I would probably never have thought to put a garbage disposal in a monster's mouth. So be curious.
Once again, great advice for all of us. And our final piece of advice comes from Adrianna Cuevas.
So I'm often asked what advice I would have for young writers. And the biggest advice that I could give you is to read absolutely as much as possible. When you're reading, pay attention to the things in the story that you like. Pay attention to the things that you don't like. And it will help you see how to use those types of strategies in your own writing. Decide whether or not you like it when an author describes a lot of things in a book, or if the plot moves really quickly, or if you like it when the chapters end at a cliffhanger. So when you're reading, if you are aware of what you like and don't like when a story is being told, then you know better how to structure your own story. So the biggest piece of advice I can give you is to read as much as you can.
Oh, yes. Excellent advice. We're all going to go out and read the amazing books that we've talked about today, I'm sure. And before we go, I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who has joined us today in our amazing school visit, including the spooky middle grade authors. Now, there's one thing that we need to do before we go as we say goodbye, and that is we're going to demonstrate for the students our amazing ghostly howl as we say goodbye. Are you ready? Okay, goodbye.